All right, being real, week 6 summary video. Here it is. We talked about living together out of wedlock, and then marriage, and briefly, obviously. So it was a continuation of week 5, the discussions of week 5, and we started with kind of defining what we wanted to look at in Scripture. As we try to do it, we have open discussion about things. We help identify what we need to look for in Scripture, what topics or things like that, because a lot of this stuff is spider web. And what I mean by that is, you think you're talking about one topic, but in reality, when you start researching it or studying, you realize it's multiple things. And a lot of times there's not a yes or no answer right away. You have to let Scripture interpret Scripture, and we talked about that actually. But we have to look at different things, and so like when Jesus says, divorce happens, but that's not the way it was intended. What did he mean by that? And then you start looking at that, and what is a relationship supposed to look like, instead of, does it say in the Bible not to live with somebody else, right? If you're looking for that, there are very few things are that yes or no. If you're trying to justify it, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, so we started with defining the different things related to whether you should live together or not, or be together or not. So came up with a list of purity, marriage, commitment, love, sexual immorality, and divorce. And that was carryover again from the prior week. And it's really kind of just looking at the whole and seeing different things. And we talked about it last week, about how the divorce rate is much higher for people that live together before marriage. And the try it before you buy thing isn't really, that's not commitment. So those kind of discussions, like I said, we had last week. So this was going to Scripture. So we had those things, we split it up amongst the group. There were, quite a few people there, so we split it up, and people read, a couple verses from, based on those topics. So because there are multiple topics, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up here the topic and then the related Scripture for purity, love, commitment, marriage, sexual immorality, and the divorce was the one, and divorce. So I'll put the stuff up there for you to see by topic this time, because there were multiple topics. Again, there was a spider web. Really not a ton of time to dig into any of those specifically. It was more of a let's look at a broader scope here of what this could be or what it's based on. What helps direct us in the way to make the right choice when it comes to living together or being with one another prior to marriage, and what impact that has. So again, because there were so many topics, you couldn't really dive into any of them, so we kind of read a little bit of each of them and kind of try to put them together for that. But Scripture's going to be up here about now. We read different Scriptures and tried to have a little discussion about that. Again, crunched on time. We have to be out of where we're at in a certain time frame. We were a little late this time, but went through that, and then as we try to do, we try to combine the discussions that we had in this case it was the week prior, because there's so much discussion, and then the Scripture, and there's a lot of discussion this week as well, because there's carryover. So combine those to come up with a summary of sorts. So the summary is this: marriage is a gift. It's important to be evenly yoked in marriage, and that refers to the man and wife both being Christians and equally trying to do their part. Short version, and that's the thing. And we had some discussion about that, and how there are quite a few people that are unevenly yoked, and there are quite a few people in the room that have been divorced, and some of them shared their stories. So not what we would call a fun topic, but it's good to share, and that's what it's about, And if we don't share our experiences that God's given us, they're wasted. You know, we're supposed to help build others up, and sometimes to build others up, you have to talk about how you were torn down. I don't know how else to say that, but yeah, some raw stuff was shared, and that's the deal. It's being real, right? It's not. We're not hiding from doing that. You know, and if you're not comfortable doing that, it's fine as well. But just saying that there were some people that shared some of their journey, and hopefully that helps others. And do appreciate the people that did that. That's awesome. It's not easy for sure. You can't make a commitment without a choice, is another thing. We talked about love and how love is a choice. Lust is more of a feeling, but love is like a commit. You're committed to that. You're choosing to love somebody. You're choosing to put that work in and to do that. And you know, it's not just a feeling. Or dating is man-made. That was another thing that came up. It's, you know, because we looked at what the marriages were like back in the biblical times, and they were arranged marriages, and sometimes you didn't even know who you were marrying until that day. Like you had no idea, and that's when it started. And there's all kinds of stuff there, but we talked a little bit about all that. And the courting side of it and all that was not from the Jewish religion. That was like Greco-Roman. That's right. Where you would court and do some of those things, which, you know, were Gentiles. What's this? Anyway, so one of the other things we talked about was divorce and how it happens, but Jesus focuses on how to live and how to be with each other. And we also talked about Paul and how he said it's easier to be single than it is to be married, and talked about that. And yeah, the concept of divorce and going into another relationship, if you know, depending on the grounds for divorce, and how you can go into another relationship as an adulterer, like scripturally kind of says that. But it's also of note that when you start into that relationship, if you follow the things that you should follow and you are committed, those things are, you know, forgiven. And there's one we're going to get into next week a little bit probably, but talking a little bit more about sin and different levels. And what's that? We talked about the sin of death. So we mentioned that, and you know, all other sin you can come back from is the short version of that. And divorce is considered a sin, but it's just, you know, there's lots of sin. We sin every day. We're human. So having that be a weight that, you know, holds you back and is just painful. And someone talked about how being divorced is like death. It's like living through it. It's mourning and all that stuff that you have to go through because it's death. And but once you get through that, how you can move forward, and it doesn't reflect on you, because there's a lot of guilt that goes with that. So had some discussion about that as well. So lots of different stuff. Spiderweb, remember, but spiderweb is just the way it is at times, and it's a bit interesting to facilitate some of that. But I do think that, you know, people sharing and doing that was important. Did it go as I planned? Nope, and that's okay. So, we'll finish with faith and action items for our week 5 and week 6 topic. Praying for commitment and love and being able to show love better is one of the things. To be guarded and to protect us from sexual immorality, because it's such a slippery slope there. To trust and expect what you pray for was another thing that was mentioned. Have a loving attitude toward everyone, including those who have done you wrong, and really wrong, because there was some mention of, you know, relationships, where again, we're talking about relationships and what could go bad about being in a relationship before marriage. I mean, there's stuff, you know, love them all. Show someone, another faith in action is show someone you love them. Show them. Do something that you don't normally do this week. That's maybe even just, you know, outside of your comfort zone. Something that's out of your character. Just show them. Not to tell them, to show them. And again, it's more about the positive side of what a relationship should be. It was our focus. Yes, there are things you need to step away from or stay away from. Fleeing sexual immorality, it says, get away from it. It's not like, oh, it's okay. No, just go the other way. A lot easier said than done, right? And then, so there's that. We stay away from that, but it was more about why is all of that? It's to have a better relationship with the person that you're going to be with. It's to put all that commitment into that. The try before you buy concept. Don't buy that one. From a practical standpoint, those that try and be like, oh, let's see if we could live together for a while and how that works. I don't know, it's like 80% divorce rate, something like that. 70, but it's high. Because you're not committed from the beginning if you're doing that kind of stuff. And we're not talking about staying over someone's house for a night, in separate rooms, and that we're talking about like full on, like, let's just try this all out and make sure that we work together. That's not commitment. And if that's what someone wants that you're in a relationship with, if you want long term, that's not good. It's not a good sign. So, anyway, tough subject. 2 weeks worth of discussions. It's like 3 hours worth. And we could have gone way longer. But the other thing that I want to say here is there's no way we're going to answer all the questions in an hour and a half. And that's not the intention. We've said this from the beginning. But, it's having a space that people feel open, safe enough to talk about things that might help somebody else, to ask questions that they might not otherwise ask, to start discussing those. But it's not stopping there, right? This group is not a Thursday night group and nothing happens the rest of the week. If you're not doing anything outside of what we talked about, you're missing out, right? It's a starter. It's a not a conversation starter, but this is to kind of ignite something. And sometimes you're going to be unsettled. I was unsettled after this last one. I know other people were as well, because you're going to talk about things that aren't fun. You're going to bring up stuff that wasn't good that you went through. There's just a lot to unpack. And you can't unpack it all in an hour and a half. But you can throw it out there and begin to unpack it. That's really what it is. So as you go through the week and you're processing things, think through the stuff that we talked about if you were there. And if you weren't there, after you read the scripture, just kind of ruminate on that and see what you can glean from it. It's your journey. This is not, hey, we're going to give you answers and tell you exactly. No. You have to find the answers. Because someone telling you the answers, that's not good. That's where false prophets become very powerful. So the goal of all of this has always and will always be for you to seek, for you to apply, and for you to figure out what it is that makes sense to you. Got it? And when I say makes sense to you, I'm not saying that there's not absolute truth. I'm not saying find your own version of the truth, because we talked about that a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Eat truth. We talked about it for 3 hours. But if you're not seeking and really looking for the answers in a way that impacts you, what are you really learning? Most of us aren't just going to take somebody at their word. And we shouldn't. Scripturally tells you that too. Alright, so hope you get something from this. Again, this is a pretty rough one. We got into a lot of topics. Which makes it very hard to focus. And there's just a lot thrown out there over a 2-week period to kind of wrestle with. And being unsettled and being like frustrated or not knowing what to, kind of normal. Kind of part of the gig when you aren't afraid to talk about things that aren't easy. Thanks for watching.